It's not every day you get an opportunity to sit down with someone who you looked at in the opposite dugout for many years, both as a player and a manager. And I couldn't be happier and more proud that we got Mike Matheny to join us for a show to talk about his new book, his career, and all the things you may not know about him that make him one of the most interesting players I've come across during the course of my career. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
David, I'm great. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, you're pretty famous to me, obviously, because we had spring training together, Marlins and Cardinals. So I saw you as a player, and you were there for the opening of Marlins Park on April 4th of 2012. I assume you remember that more for something other than it was the opening of the ballpark.
Yeah. That I got in a bind right in the beginning, and Ozzy caught me as I had players moving in and out, and almost fatal mistake of trying to get a player in and where they were in the lineup, and Ozzy caught me out on it. Fortunately, we had enough talent on our club to cover up for my shortcomings. But I also remember someone bringing over a base from that game and giving me a first win base off of the field in Miami, and what a great memory that was. I'm grateful that you did that for me.
So, Mike, a funny story for that. So, people, just to play catch up, that was your first managerial win with the St. Louis Cardinals. And we'd been trying to get a ballpark done for the 10 years that I had been in Miami at that time. And all I wanted to do, we had a new manager, we had new players. I was solely focused on winning that one game. It was so critical to me to win opening day in front of the sold out fans, Muhammad Ali, all of the dancers. And Josh Johnson starts the game striking out for Cal, and I'm thinking, we're good, we've got this. And that was it. We almost got no hit. That's what you almost did to us on that day. But when the game ended, we had an allocation of bases. We switched them out during the course of the game because we wanted the keepsakes. And I knew it was your first win. And to me, it was a no-brainer because now we are totally linked in the history of Marlins Park.
Well, and what a incredible display that was. What it just felt like Miami. It was alive and vibrant. The colors and dancers, and yeah, bringing Muhammad Ali, like that was epic for many of us to just be in the same space as where he was. I thought that was all exceptionally well done, so well received by the city, and the support that you got right from the beginning was very impressive. But just like you, all I had my eyes set on was that first game too, and trying. My goal was a lot like the medical creed: do no harm. And unfortunately, late I made a decision. Man, it was amazing, David, how the game really does speed up. And there was a lot of moving parts and double switches and making sure the guys were in the right spots, and it just added to the complexity. But fortunately, we ended up on the right side of that one.
We talked about that. So, two things about that. First, you may not remember, but you allowed us to start that game late, even though it was a nationally televised game, because Muhammad Ali wasn't feeling right, and he needed time. And so, how games work. There's timelines that you have to respect, but we couldn't get Muhammad Ali out onto the field. And so there was a delay, and we got permission from the broadcasters from baseball, and we needed to talk to you about it. And we knew it was your first game, and we knew there was a lot going on opening day, and you couldn't have been more gracious about that. So it's a little bit delayed here, but thank you for that.
No, man, what a pleasure! And once again, I was blown away at the I don't know, just the production of what was going on there. But I think it once again grabbed the essence of Miami. I was actually there yesterday as we're down in South Florida right now. It's a city that's just alive and happening. There's a lot of potential distractions, especially for some of our Latin players as they get into that Miami area. But wow, just a fun place to go, a great atmosphere, and it was interesting to watch them year before last too, and watch the really good push that they put on with my former players with Skip Schumacher and John Mabry over there, just looking to find those markets that should be doing some really good things in baseball, and they pulled off some really nice seasons.
I want to talk about the market. Actually, I want to talk about St. Louis, but I don't want to even go another minute without talking about the new book that you have coming out. And again, so just a scouting report on Mike Matheny, you have to go back and realize that he's one of the great catchers that I ever saw over my career. And having someone facing the field who is well above average, that is how you win games. And then a very successful manager, very successful. And now a really accomplished author. And the new book is a subject that I've been talking about forever. You beat me to the book. It is such an important subject. It's called The Dad Coach: How to Lead Kids to Succeed on and Off the Field. It will go on sale Tuesday, March 25th, wherever you get books. Please buy it and read it, because, Mike, what I want to talk about is you decided to put into words what so many of us think in the industry when we are with our kids, when we're dealing with Little League and all of the expectations that we see around us. Tell me about the thought process when you said this is the right time to actually put it in writing.
Yeah, and David, same as you, just trying to look at the landscape, and we are ambassadors for the game, whether we like it or not, and we have a responsibility. And I remember as I finished playing, and I was asked to coach a youth league team, I went to this group of parents and said, "Listen, you might not like what I've got, and I'm interested in coaching, but there's going to be some things that need to be tackled here right from the beginning. And maybe I'm not your guy. I'll be down the right field line and I'll be really happy sitting in a chair. But if you'd like me to coach your kids, here are some things that I think have got off track." And the majority of it is what defines success in youth sports. And can we get back to where this is about developing young men? It's not trying at the 5 and 6 year old level, making such crazy expectations and pressure on them to get that scholarship or to make it to the major leagues. It can be an and proposition to where we're going to grow them up. We're going to use what sports, I believe, are meant to be. First of all, fun. We're going to make it fun, hopefully teach them a passion for the game. And then on the backside of that, use the things that happen naturally in sports, with time management, with failure, with handling success, with understanding how to be a selfless teammate, all those things that develop or help, use it as a resource to help develop future young men that are going to be successful in any arena of their life.
Yeah, I think that parents don't realize the impact. I was hoping to get an illustration in the book, and here is my imitation for those of you watching on YouTube. My imitation of a child where there is a major problem in Little League is when they're at bat and they swing, and on the backswing, their head turns toward the stands in order to meet eyes with their father, who is huffing and puffing when it's a swing and a miss, or being jubilant when it is some sort of contact. And I had a major problem with that. So you say right field, and I know what you mean, because my son, who's graduating college this coming May, I watched all of his Little League games and freshman, JV, varsity. I watched him down the line because I couldn't stand the way parents would act. And parents would come up to me and say, "Is my kid good? Is my kid good? Will you sign my kid? He's going to be a big leaguer, isn't he?" And it was so awful to watch that happen. We actually, Mike, and I want to talk about this next with you, players who are good, but they actually can't play baseball because of their parents' involvement. And we had a big leaguer we drafted whose father was so over the top that he never made it to the big leagues. And I blame his father, actually.
Wow. And you're right. And it's never a shortfall in love and care. I mean, they
No,
love their
I
kids.
agree.
Like, we get that. But I think they need to hear from people like you and people like me who've actually been there. And I've done some impromptu interviews with guys throughout the league for years. Like, tell me about how your parents went about it. And I just want people to understand that there's another option out there. Like, they're going to go to the field and they're going to see some of these really good teams and people acting out of their mind. And so the uneducated, or if they haven't been as experienced in the sports world, they think that's how I have to act. And in the meanwhile, the odds of them driving their kids from the game or driving a wedge in their relationship with their kids is growing exponentially when you can do this a different way and still help them get as far as they could possibly get with the abilities that they have. And I think there's a way you can do both.
How important was honesty to you? Because I probably took it to an extreme when people would hand me a CD and say, please, can you help me evaluate my child? And I would basically say, he's not going to be a big leaguer, so let him enjoy this moment. He's 8. Please just have him play a game and learn how to be a teammate, learn how to be a mensch. That's the Yiddish word that I would use a lot, that would be funny in some groups and less funny in others. But how many times did that happen to you where there would be such a gulf between reality and fantasy?
Yeah, more often than not. But I was also very, very quick not to tell a kid that he can't do something too. Now, trying to keep parents realistic, and a lot of that, I believe, is on the shoulders of the coach to make sure that these kids are getting into the right competition level. So coming back to this book, our book is really aimed at the 6 to 12-year-olds to where they're just getting started. And then I believe you need to have a healthy separation at some point to say, hey, we have some boys, let them go chase their dream. But let them go into a tryout situation to where they're going to be playing at the level where they should be playing. And I think when you get to that teenage, almost into high school age, it's going to start defining for itself. But I'll never forget, David, I was 12 years old and we had a college coach show up, and it was the middle of summer. He's in this full red sweatsuit and he's sweating all over the joint. But he comes up and he tells us our odds of ever making to the major leagues are so radically small that we shouldn't even waste our time. We should be thinking about a university like his. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, coach, with all due respect, somebody's got to get there, right? Like, why not me? And I wouldn't have stood out as having this great ability as a kid. I had to grind and I had to fight and I had to keep competing, but I'm glad I never took my eyes off of that dream.
Wait, Mike, you weren't the best player on your team when you were 12?
Not even close.
So I am shocked to hear that, because my general view is that to be a big leaguer, you have to be the best on pretty much every team you're on, and then still it's really hard. Are there any other big leaguers who you grew up playing with?
No, I was very fortunate. I had a coach who was a minor league catcher, and he was wise enough to grab a bunch of us, and we played a lot of baseball, but almost, and it sounds hypocritical because I keep saying that it's not the goal of getting to college or playing professionally, but the good majority of those boys, part of it was the instruction, part of it was that he stacked the deck and he chose some pretty talented players. Now, I was athletic, and I was going to be able to play a college sport because that was something I didn't even earn. That was a gift. But there were actually, I wasn't even the best catcher in the state of Ohio in my graduation class. There's a kid that ended up going to Ohio State, right where we grew up, and he was everybody's first choice, including my alma mater at Michigan. And we had to sit around and wait to see where he was going to go. I was a late bloomer, and David, that was a gift. I was smaller than everybody else. I was a year younger, but eventually I did catch up. But I learned how to fight and grind and keep kicking and scratching and clawing until I finally figured out how to be a pretty good player.
When you say a year younger, does that mean you played up? So when you were 8, you were playing in the 10U? What do you mean by a year younger?
I started school a year, so I was the youngest in my class.
Got it.
Mom and dad needed to get to work, and so the best place to have kids is inside school. So they sent us off early. And in the meanwhile, I was playing with kids that were older than me all the time and didn't even realize because we were in the same grade. And it just seemed, my dad was a big man, it still is, so I knew that eventually I'd probably grow, but it seemed to take forever.
Do you think there's something that can be done with parents who have these 6 to 12-year-old children? And I, this is a great conversation because you and I, we said 2 different things, but I think they're each important. I agree you have to chase your dreams, but I also agree that when you are strangling a child, and I don't mean literally, and stifling that child, it actually impacts them off the field. And so my concern with kids always was, when I was around them, it's that just because baseball is a game of failure doesn't mean that life is. And that you've got to be able to understand when you're going to fail and what that means on your path to your own success. And I think 6 to 12 is the exact age to do it, but most people are afraid to tackle that, Mike.
Yeah, and there's just such a great opportunity. To me, I've just always seen this as a privilege and a responsibility to go out and to invest into these young men. And that's always kind of the angle that I'm encouraging these young coaches and the parents is, how can you use these sports once again to build something beyond the game, but also and not let them walk away from the challenge of achieving that dream. I I had a couple kids that I coached during that span in between playing and managing, that I was really surprised that it did end up playing it collegiately, and they weren't the most talented on the team, and they ended up getting drafted and playing for a couple of years. And once again, it's one of those stories of just go try and figure out a way to make this really special for all of them, and then try to be honest. As you were saying, David, there's some kids whose parents, they just really didn't have enough experience to know whether or not they should be shooting for the stars or not. So you tried to talk them through that, point all the holes that you see in their game, give them some things that are obviously going to get in their way of where they think they want to be. And then the others, just keep feeding them. And to me, and I mentioned this in the book, I believe as long as the kids are the engines that are driving this thing, and you can afford to, without putting your family into a bind, to get some of the lessons, and it is the motivation and the passion and the love of the game that these kids are having, not the mature adult in us that wants to tell them and show them what we already know, and that they need to go be more disciplined with their diet and then weight training and then pitching lessons, hitting lessons. Once we start driving that, that's usually when the kids start backing off, and then they're going to navigate towards video games or something else where nobody's going to tell them how to do it.
We're talking about The Dad Coach, which is a book coming out Tuesday, March 25th, and it's written by Mike Matheny, How to Lead Kids to Succeed on and Off the Field. And you mentioned something, and it's interesting how there's a through line in the book. And I want people to understand that what your point of view is, and I absolutely agree with it, is that there's so many different factors, if you think about them as different pillars to success, and you need continuity between children and their parents. And this is almost like a roadmap. And the reason that's so important is that kids who are in band, a good example, they play the French horn or the clarinet, they're likely not going to be in the Philharmonic. They're likely not going to be in a world-class band earning a living, but what they're learning to be is part of a team. They're learning to actually have discipline, to practice. Many of us through life do things when we're younger that we don't necessarily do as a vocation or even an avocation. So I encourage everyone to please read the book, because it doesn't just apply. And I think this is, Mike, do you agree? This is not just about baseball.
No, it's really about coaching, and coaching can be just about in anything. I'm doing some coaching right now with some other coaches, just trying to challenge and encourage, which I believe is what a coach does. And I believe the saying that a coach will influence more people in a year than most people will in a lifetime. I believe that quote to be true. Not just a baseball coach, but as you said, David, whatever somebody's passionate about, at some point they're going to need some outside help. And how can we help? Yes, whatever skill that is, whatever passion it is, help drive them and encourage them and challenge them. But in the meanwhile, you have a voice that you don't even realize, a voice that will help them. And what an honor. I've been asked for 4 of the kids that I coached when they started out at 10. I've been asked by 4 of them to perform their wedding ceremonies. I've been asked to step in
Wow.
and write letters of recommendation for college entrance exams and for jobs, and to watch these now men who are about to become dad coaches themselves, and realize that was such a monumental time for them. They had great parents. I wasn't trying to step in as their dad. They had that. There was a different voice. And there is something about when you have that motivation, whether it is in band, playing an instrument, or playing in sports, when you have that coach in place, there's a level of respect that goes along, and an opportunity to give them something that lasts way beyond however long they play that sport or play that instrument.
So bring me into your head when you're in a major league clubhouse, and not as a player, I'm talking about as a manager. And you're looking at these grown men, although some of them are younger than you realize. And if you put them in the real world at that age, you wouldn't say they're fully formed men. But in baseball, we count on them to be and give them the money and responsibility to be. Did you ever get frustrated inside the clubhouse that you were not able to be the coach that you knew you could be because they weren't interested in listening? Was that an issue for you? I would imagine it would be frustrating.
Yeah, at some extent. But then you had the complete opposite side of the spectrum too. And David, you realize how few or how many of these, especially some of the Latin American kids who never had a male role model in their life. And if they believe that you care about them and they believe that you want the best for them, man, it opens up some incredible doors. And I was fortunate to have a few of them one of them still texts me, and he always starts it off as dad. And I know it's probably like a poppy thing. It's just kind of a saying, but man, I take that seriously. And so I'm just wide open, like, hey, yes, we're going to talk baseball. Yes, I'm going to pull you when you need to be pulled for the good of the team, or play you when you need to play, and maybe not when it has nothing to do with it. But behind closed doors, when it's the X's and O's, when those are over, let's get real about life. And I had some guys that couldn't or didn't, as you said, they didn't necessarily want to cross that line, and I get that. But there were some others that were, and I think it's just being hypersensitive as a coach to realize that some of these guys need something, the other ones are going to need something else, and how can I figure out whatever that need is.
I was just going to say, you just touched on what I look for in a manager, and of course, we hired and fired so many in my career. But one of the most important things is that it really is 25, now 26 different relationships. You just like you can't parent each child the same way, you can't manage each player the same way. Was that a challenge to you? Because a catcher, we always viewed the best catchers, they are managers on the field and managers in the clubhouse. Did you find that you were not able, as the actual manager, to be as impactful as you were, like when you were teammates with Albert, as an example?
Yeah,
Did you think that you were able to do more as a teammate versus a manager?
I do. I think the buck's going to stop in that manager's office, and he's going to have to make the hard decisions. And it is a weird phenomenon. I went from being the roving catching instructor and special assistant to the St. Louis Cardinals, and 2 weeks later, I get the job as manager. As the assistant general manager, or as the special assistant, I was constantly getting guys coming and talking to me, but there's something about that office. That office is just like the principal's office, and it can be a little intimidating at times. But I always did try to just keep those doors open. And how can I earn some rapport with this player to where he does trust me? Now, trust is earned, and I'm going to have to earn that. And most of that's going to be about, as you mentioned earlier, with some of the young players, it's just that radical candor of that honesty of, hey, here's where we are, here's where you are, and this is going to have to happen. And it was way easier for that to be heard as a contemporary, as a teammate, as opposed to the principal's office.
Did your relationship with Yadier Molina change? Yadier Molina, you played with him. I believe, did you ever play with him? I would assume you did. And if I have my years right, you managed him as well.
I did. Yeah.
Tell me how that works.
Well, I would say hands down the highest baseball IQ person I'd ever been around in the game. And what a gift for a young manager who really had no idea what he was doing to have that behind the plate. He was an extra coach on the field. But same principle as before, that it's a little more awkward when it's the manager and the guy who's dictating playing time, the guy that's making decisions, and especially when you're smart and you get the game and you have your own ideas and your own thoughts and your own questions. And we opened those up, and I wanted to hear him, and I used him like a coach, and I constantly was taking what he was seeing behind the plate. But it was fortunate, he was my backup my last year in St. Louis. It was a funny story. Everywhere I went, there was always going to be this next guy who's going to take your job. And I would wait until spring training, and we'd go work a little bit, and I'd come home and tell my wife, Kristen, like, that guy is not taking my job. So it was around the early 2000s, and our catching coach, Dave Ricketts, took me on the backfield and said, I need you to see this 17-year-old kid. He took me back there, and I watched him for about 10 minutes, and I went home and said,
that's it.
I've seen him, so I got to dig in deep and enjoy this while I can.
So it's interesting when you talk about the relationship would change. And you needed Molina, actually, because he can be, every manager needs someone in the clubhouse who is really going to carry the water for the manager in certain communications. And as you're a first-time manager and you're dealing with someone who you just said is the highest baseball IQ, were you able to manage him? And I mean that in both senses of the word, immediately, or did that develop over time? How did you do that?
No, it took some time, and I think it should. That's something that you have to earn. Now, he was, once again, he was playing behind me, and I had the opportunity and the privilege of investing into him as we were teammates. And then when I was the catching instructor too. But when I stepped into that role, I needed to prove to those guys, listen, Tony La Russa just walked out of there, right? And they just won the World Series. And 2 weeks later, they give the keys to this guy who's coaching Little League. Like, you got to go earn it. And I don't blame them for making me earn it. But in the meanwhile, they knew a few things about me that I was going to be truthful to them. I believe they knew I cared. But it's still, it's an earn everything at that level in that league. You got to earn it.
I think you're downplaying one thing, which is that you started earning that as a player. And I think that when players see that, see what you've done, we put a GM in the manager's office, a guy named Dan Jennings, who's a good friend. And we made that move that was quite a shocking move at the time back in 2016. And talk about earning it. That was something that I did not take into account as much because I'd had a bunch of first-year managers like Joe Girardi who had catcher, had credibility as a player. But when you talk about earning respect, you have to do that whether the kids are 6 to 12, whether they're big leaguers, believe it or not, dealing with the parents. So I want to get back to the book, The Dad Coach, and ask, what is it when someone reads your book? Give me 3 takeaways if you were doing the audio book in their ear during a game. What are the 3 things that you want parents, especially fathers, to take away?
Yeah, I would say the first one is this is all about the kids, and I think it's hard for us as
That's a tough
parents,
one.
yeah, not to check out, and a lot of that it's legit in the fact that there's huge investment made, right? There's huge investment financially, there's huge investment on your time, and the sacrifice from the rest of your family. And anybody who makes investment is going to want a return on that investment. So sooner or later, that pressure is real, and I think it's just continuing to check your ego at the door that this is about my child. Whatever they're getting into, whatever we're committing to, it's about them, and I'm not looking for some sort of return. I'd say that was the first one, and I'd say
Okay.
the second is fun. Is how can we do this and make this fun? Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose kids in the game. We've been losing them anyhow because there's so many cool options out there, so many things different than even you and I had. There's a lot of things that they can do with their free time. How can we make this so much fun that they can't wait to do it again? And I'd say the last one is it's about character development and use this game to teach those things. You mentioned it earlier, the time management. I would say to handle failure, to use this game to handle success, use this game to handle what it feels like to be a teammate. And that word right there, if you're a good teammate, there's one thing that stands out is you're a selfless person. And I would say any relationship you have, if you can go into that at least a little more selflessly, you're going to be better than most.
Let me push back on the third one and say that I had players who were bad teammates, but they were so good on the field that the clubhouse and upper management was willing to look past the fact that they were bad teammates. So is it a corollary that you're willing to consider that your third most important point may be in jeopardy if the player is good enough?
I would still say that particular player, and I've played with and had teammates as manager and as player, that style of player that was so super talented that they were going to be successful. But I'll also tell you this, they're going to have regret. They're going to have regret because it's a very lonely ride when that whole thing is about you. And I would challenge too. I'll push back and say, we watch, whether it be the Navy SEALs or whether it's our Green Berets or our Delta Force people, you go ask them what drives them and to go do some things that nobody else is willing to do. And they bought into the fact that this is not about me. I believe there's plenty of science that backs the fact that you will do things beyond what you normally would do when you buy into a cause greater than yourself. And that
Of
selflessness, I
course.
believe those great players, if they would have bought into that theory, I believe they would have been even greater.
But you must have had some turds in your day. We all did. Every team does, right? So that it's the job of the manager and the job of the front office to decide when the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore.
Yeah,
And
that's
your
tough.
point is an interesting one, that trying to get more out of that player to become more selfless. I did not necessarily succeed in that way every time.
No, and most don't. But I still think if you believe it to be true and you define that as part of the culture that you think, because I believe it's a multiplier. I believe it is a talent multiplier. A couple of reasons. One, I think the unspoken elephant in the room in sports, especially in baseball right now, is anxiety. That we have so much pressure. These guys are under the microscope and nobody wants to hear it. Nobody, and we're not asking for their sympathy, but it's real, almost a debilitating anxiety at times. And it's because nobody is meant to be on 24/7 a day. You're just not. And with this mentality of switching that, it's not just about me, it's freedom. It actually, it kind of takes the shackles off of having to everything be about you to where you can think about somebody else. And that's freeing and liberating enough sometimes to unlock you to go ahead and enjoy a little bit more. I would say that's part of it. But I do come back to the fact of seeing some of these unbelievable players that later come back and say, I wish I would have been a little bit better of a teammate. I know that I was whatever you want to call them. They'll fall into that category, and they regret it. And that, to me, I don't care what you do in life and for a living or in family and relationships, if you can go and look back and say, I've got no regrets about how I went about doing that. I dropped the ball at times, but I fixed it, and I kept coming back, and I kept getting better, and I kept improving. That, to me, to be able to look back with no regrets, is a gift.
You want more of these type of life lessons, then go out and buy The Dad Coach, How to Lead Kids to Succeed on and Off the Field. It's on sale Tuesday, March 25th. Mike, I don't know how this happened. We're out of time. I really do appreciate you took the time, and continued good luck. I hope you don't stop writing. I hope you don't stop coaching and managing all things on and off the field. Thank you, Mike.
David, thank you. It was a pleasure. Honor.